I didn't have a smartphone when I graduated high school. I had one of those flip phones. So I think that's extremely relevant to this conversation. There was one study that I read that I burst out laughing because it said 60% of adolescents report viewing or interacting with a screen within 1 hour before bedtime. Do you believe that stat?
60%?
Yeah.
That sounds very low.
Right. I think that's the dumbest stat I've ever heard in my
lying.
life. 100%. It was a self-reported adolescent study.
Oh, self-reported. There we go.
Now, granted, this was from, I believe it was 2014, 2015. I'd have to double check. But,
okay.
In the world of 2023, that number's got to be 90, 95%. I really only think it would be adolescents, maybe with great discipline, or parents that are really willing to say, give me that goddamn phone, and you do not have a television in your room. Because, look, I have nieces and nephews. We always joke that they kind of lack in some social skills because they are just always on their phone, just nonstop. And there's some very interesting physiology around this that I want to talk about. Okay, so, we always hear in the news, this whole thing about blue wave lights that has to do with shorter wavelengths actually are more effective than longer wavelengths at suppressing melatonin levels, phase shifting the circadian clock, acutely increasing alertiveness, and altering subsequent sleep. Okay, so in short, the blue light is more harmful for sleep than the longer wavelengths. Okay, we've seen this in the news, but I think it's very interesting. Okay, why is this? And children are actually more sensitive to this than adults. Okay, it actually has to do with the ophthalmologic features of their eyes. Okay, so children relative to adults actually have a larger pupil size. So they do get more light into their eye compared to adults. And there's also increased light transmission rate of the crystal lens. So what's even more interesting, it actually has to do with age too. Younger children actually have more of this melatonin suppression compared to their adolescent colleagues. So this is so relevant to kids, right? How many times do kids have their own cell phone? What? Kids are getting their own cell phone at the age of 10 these days, right? Or a parent will just hand them an iPad or whatever to shut them up at the end of the night, or watching television just towards the end of the night. What do you think about this?
Well, first of all, you didn't have you only had a flip phone in high school, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first of all, I think that you're a dinosaur. That's point number one.
I got some gray in this beard.
And number two, it's not even using the cell phones before bed, but how many teenagers are actually sleeping with their phones under their pillow,
right,
on their nightstands, and every time they wake up, if they wake up during the night, I would argue that almost everybody has this impulsive reaction to want to check their time. They look at their phones and they're getting some of that blue light again, right? And it's very interesting to hear how teenagers talk about it. They kind of say, I know I shouldn't do it, but I can't help it. Almost like an addict would talk about their substance of choice. It's crazy how much pull these devices have and the impact that it's having on the quality of sleep that our youngest population is getting.
Right. And, maybe an area of research that really I want to go into, because I didn't really find good research that I liked when I was researching this topic. We keep saying screen time, screen time, screen time. But is all screen time equal here? Is scrolling through your Instagram feed or TikTok feed the same kind of alert stimulation that someone gets from playing a video game? Are different video games different? Is an intensive Call of Duty different than someone who's playing, Mario, or maybe even some lower intensity game that's just sort of for fun, versus some potentially violent, or versus a sports game? What about television? Is watching a cell phone versus watching a TV really radically different? What about how far away that screen is from your eyes? For me personally, look, I of course, me and you are doctors. I'm still playing with my phone at the end of the night. Every once in a while, I'll have perfect sleep hygiene, but that is extremely rare. There's a lot of times I'm engaging with my screen. But what I've learned I love video games. We've done episodes on video games. I can't play video games late at night. Video games, most especially, get me ramped up. I am just charged. I am just so into that game. I am having so much fun. Versus, when I'm watching, especially like a casual television show that's not all that stimulating, maybe old episodes of Seinfeld, old episodes of The Office, I'm not as alert and in tune because I've already seen the episodes. I'm kind of whatever with the plot. I have a much easier time falling asleep engaging with that kind of screen time. So I really wonder, we just talk about screen time, this blue light stuff, and I get it, it's physiologically relevant, but the quality of screen time, the engagement of that screen time, I think is important too.
That's an interesting thing to think about, because I wonder what happens if instead of playing games, instead of watching Netflix, you're reading a book on your Kindle app, right? Because there's been studies that looked at reading a book compared to using a cell phone. It didn't necessarily specify what activities they were doing on their cell phone, but it showed pretty clear evidence that cell phone use is linked with a decreased in terms of the hours of sleep that you were getting at night versus people that were reading books, magazines, so these so-called older forms of entertainment. It actually did not have any impact on their sleeps. So they were able to put their books down, they were able to put their magazines down at an appropriate time and get a full night of rest. And not even just the question about what exactly is the type of content they're consuming on their devices. I would also throw into the equation how long they're using the device for during a day, because there are studies done, and there seems to be an inflection point at around 2 hours of use. So teens who spent 2 or more hours a day on their electronic devices were 28% less likely to get 7 hours of sleep. And actually, teens who visited social media sites every day were 19% more likely not to get an adequate night of sleep. So there you have it. After 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours seems to be that inflection point. So look, Logan, in today's world, I don't think it's reasonable to expect anybody, let alone our teenagers, to not use social media, to not use cell phones. But I think as psychiatrists, as clinicians for whom sleep quality and sleep time is very, very relevant to the pathology and the outcomes that we see, we need to do a better job of educating our patients on what the appropriate limit, the upper limit would be on the recommended amount of screen time. And perhaps that can lead to a better outcome, and perhaps that's the most reasonable approach, because I think we're going to lose a lot of people. A lot of people are going to tune us out if we just said, hey, you can't be using that. You can't be doing that.